So I've been told I need to slow down when I talk. Apparently I talk very fast, so my goal for this episode is to slow it down for the teeming masses. Pre-show quid pro quo. Alex, you get one question. Go ahead and ask.
Now, Doug, we talked earlier, and I said I wouldn't hit you with something big. I wanted to keep it light, but I've changed my mind already. Doug, do you believe in good and evil?
Do I believe in good and evil? One of the...
Oh, sorry, and a follow-up. Do you believe good and evil believes in you?
Well, for a period of time, one of my favorite books was a book called The Lucifer Principle by Howard Bloom. And he basically laid it out that he thinks that Mother Nature is Lucifer and it is intrinsically evil. And he got a lot of flack for that from people that said that you can't say something as abstract as Mother Nature is evil. It has no qualitative value. You can't say that it is evil. You can't say that if a gazelle was to eat an antelope that it is doing something evil even though it's eating this antelope alive. If it was not to eat the antelope, then its kids would starve and it would not be able to feed its young. Do I think that good and evil, do I believe it exists? No. I strangely think that there are things that I don't like about the world and aspects of the world that are just absolutely abhorrent. And there are things about the world that we should orient ourselves towards that are lofty ambitions and the highest goals of both humans and non-human entities. As far as being able to say something that is black and white as good or evil, I don't think you can. Do I think that good and evil believes in me? Doubtful. I'm a small being trying to do well in the world, and it's seemingly things will happen without my intervention or my action. So,
okay, thank you, Doug.
Hey everybody, welcome to What Magic Is This? A podcast that wishes to take your head in its arms and give you a brotherly kiss on the temple. We will be going through magic, the occult, the paranormal, the supernatural, and the weird. My name is Doug, I will be your host, and I am joined by none other than Alex. Alex, thank you so much for coming on the show.
It's my honor. Thank you, Doug.
And you've picked a very interesting topic. I give a list of about 25 subjects to my potential guests, and they get to choose one. The list is a little bit curated because this is early stages of the podcast, and most people have been picking somewhat broad topics. There are specific topics in there, things like Heinrich Cornelius Agrippa or LFS Levy, but most people are kind of staying on the edges, which is good, but it also kind of makes me a little bit trepidatious because I have been dreading doing this episode on symbols. You've chosen the topic of symbols. The reason I've been dreading it is because it really goes to the heart of magic. I'm going to start this topic off with a little bit of poetry. You ready? In nature's temple, living pillars rise, speaking sometimes in words of abstruse sense. Man walks through woods of symbols dark and dense, which gaze at him with fond familiar eyes. Like distant echoes blent in the beyond, in unity in a deep darksome way, vast as black night and vast as splendid day, perfumes and sounds and colors correspond. Oh, that's some Charles Baudelaire there for people that know him. Himself not too shabby in the occult department, but I think it kind of sets a tone, if you will. We have this idea of symbols being like a forest, and human beings are just wandering through these signs and mysterious things that we don't understand. And this is entirely true. We can't get around symbols. In fact, the way that our brain works, and this is what I'm going to get into. The brain works symbolically. Symbolic thinking is thinking. Now, I'm going to try and stay away from universals. Fortunately, with this one, I can't. I really can't. I have to make sweeping universal statements, and I apologize to everybody because of this regard. And so, every thought is somehow symbolic. Thoughts do not exist in a vacuum. For them to manifest in so-called reality, they need a symbolic vector. So every action that you somehow take is a representation of something else, or it represents something else, or is an interpretation of something else. Symbolic thinking is magic, plain and simple. Symbols are the original act of magic. All of it comes back to this, and no doubt symbolic thinking probably started pretty much on the heels, if not contemporaneously, with becoming what we would call fully conscious. There's also strange evidence that we're just looking into now, that symbolic thinking is not exclusively human. And this is stuff that really interests me. I love animals, and you're shaking your head now, but and we have to keep in mind that symbolic thinking is different than tool use, right? If an otter uses a rock to crush a clam on its stomach, it's not, it doesn't think that rock is a sledgehammer, right? But otters have been seen to use stuffed toys. We're seeing, especially in captivity, elephants are painting things, and they're not just putting paint on a canvas, they're actually choosing the colors of what is in their view, strangely enough. And this is very, very new science, and for me, maybe one of the most exciting parts of what's happening with biology and zoology right now.
You had me do some reading before the show to peel back the curtain a little.
Yeah.
And the gentleman who I was reading explained that the term evolution, it literally means unfolding.
Unfolding.
And so unfolding human evolution and human thought processes into symbolic thinking or magical thinking in line with language and higher understanding, it seems like it's a natural progression.
Absolutely, yeah, I would say so. I'm going to try also for this episode to kind of try to leave semiotics out of it, because semiotics itself is just that's such a huge aspect of the human experience. So we're not gonna get too semiotic here. We're going to attempt to talk about symbols in a more occult and magical based context. So because symbols are so primary to magic, it is usually the first thing that people become interested in with the occult. They'll have a book of just magic itself is just a book of words to a lot of people. It's not until you see like a pentagram or a strange sigil or an interesting lines that look a little bit out of place, or alchemical symbols, that's what kind of pulls you in. Symbols are kind of like the gateway for most magicians. They'll see a copy of the Necronomicon, or the Simonomicon as it was called, which attempts to be a grimoire, a book of magic, but it's got a really cool glyph on the cover, and the book is just filled with these interesting things, and they draw us in. So another great example are tarot cards. The imagery of the tarot cards, they speak to something almost within us. What did these symbols mean? This curiosity of what the symbols are themselves is extremely attractive. I'm going to talk a little bit about my top 5 symbols up to my life at this point. Number 1, skulls. I'm obsessed with skulls. My house is littered with skulls. I love the culture of Mexico and the history of Mexico, and I go down there on a yearly basis. And apparently this is something that could be hereditary. My uncle on my mom's side also had this fascination with skulls. They just love skulls. If there's a skull on something, my eye just goes there immediately.
I think it's called the cool guy gene.
The cool guy gene. Wow, thank goodness I have that.
Yep.
Yeah, no, that's amazing. I just remember a skateboard that my cousin had, and I didn't like skateboarding, but he had a skateboard with a skull on it, and from there I became a skateboarder for a period of about 8 years, merely just due to a skull. The other symbol, number 2, is the all-seeing eye, or the kind of in the same way, almost the Eye of Horus. The idea of an eye within a pyramid and the mystery of that eye itself. And it's on the American $1 bill. Again, I don't know why, but this kind of stuff just absolutely attracts me. Number 3 is the very obvious one that everybody who had a notebook and a pen when they were younger is the pentagram. It's you got time to doodle. Eventually, there's going to be a pentagram in there.
Can I tell you about the pentagram in my life?
Sure. Tell me about the pentagram.
I was pretty agnostic as far as it came to symbols for a long time.
Right.
as far as doodling went, I preferred skulls.
Nice.
I met a young man in high school who became one of my best friends. He was a big brain. He loved to read. He loved the occult. He was
this guy already.
Very thoughtful, very thoughtful man. And he would just idly doodle pentagrams as a sign of protection. And I understand that's what the pentagram means. Anything
one
within
of the meanings.
One of the meanings.
One of the meanings. Yeah.
And my favorite place he used to draw it, he would put it on his family car before they left in the morning, or just in the dust. But he would draw it on his inner hand or outer hand between his thumb and his index finger.
Okay.
It was almost like he was drawing a little X, but it was a pentagram, and it was to remind him of something he needed to do later. And so it was to protect his plans.
Very good.
And he would just always have this little blue smudge of a pentagram on his inner hand and go about his life. And to this day, I see a pentagram and I think of him.
Are you still friends with him?
He has passed away.
Oh, I'm very sorry to hear that.
So that's why I like pentagrams so much.
Did he commit suicide?
He did.
Yeah. And, that's tragic, but I'm sure he was dealing with things that we just didn't see. Well, the other symbol,
Number 3.
This is a terrible segue. The other symbol that I liked, and maybe this was kind of from the age of 12 to about 18, I loved the anarchy symbol, the A with the circle, and the lines seemed to go outside the A. I don't know what it was. I wasn't political in any way, shape, or form, but just the symbol itself of that anarchy, and especially if it was graffitied on a wall, that was cool to me. I don't know why. Yeah, it was just something that I did.
Fuck this system.
Yeah, but I didn't want to. I just thought the symbol itself. Again, a lot of these things they completely just came to me, and I found them interesting. The other one, I was obsessed with Kokopelli. Do you know Kokopelli?
I have no idea.
Kokopelli is kind of, you might see it in like New Age stores. It's a Hopi glyph. It means the spirit with the wooden spine or wooden back. It's a figure holding, kind of with a hunchback, holding a flute, and it kind of looks like it's got dreadlocks coming out of the top of its head, or it's like antlers. Anyways, I would draw them all over books. I would give my family gifts with the Kokopelli on it without even knowing what it means. It was just a really cool symbol to me. Strangely enough, there's stories of Kokopelli when he would visit Native American tribes, and they would dance and be merry all night, and then he would disappear in the morning, and the crops would be fruitful. Their daughters were all pregnant. There's got to be something about the fact that we equate flutes somehow to fecundity or to fertility itself. Like a pan is another good example. Alex, is there a specific symbol that you find speaks to you a bit more than other symbols do?
I like the half moon.
Okay.
It speaks to me of kind of celestial power and understanding. But I haven't really researched it more than anything else. I think the pentagram, the circled pentagram, is more my speed. It's easily digested as far as just a protection sigil or what have you. But other than that, I think the symbols I interpret in the world every day are more, as you say, it's language, it's magical thinking. It's I've received a symbol from someone when I get splashed in the rain by a car or something. It's today's not going to go my way or something. That's a symbol of my future. Yeah,
Nice.
less the actual physical symbols than the physical ones.
You have tattoos, and the symbols that you have, the things that you have tattooed, did those mean something to you at a certain point in time? Has their power diminished, or?
Yes, absolutely. Like that's the Cyrillic Misha for the gentleman with and I'm pointing at tattoos on my chest for the listener. But yes, I have several tattoos of people's names in their native languages, and it's kind of a powerful way for me to remember kind of who that person was.
Yeah. No, I like the moon. I think the moon is a fantastic. It's one of those symbols that's just been with humanity, well, for as long as we've been able to see it. What are symbols? We all know what they are. They are a representation of an abstract quality. It comes from the word symbalin, which is Greek for put together or agreement, contract, watchword. And
I really liked, sort of interrupt, I really liked the passage. It's a symbol as more like two ideas passing in the night and forming some sort of bond.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. A good example of this, especially to the Greeks, was when they would enter into a business contract, they would take a clay vessel and break it. And each of the people within that contract would get a shard of this vessel that could be put back together. They are in agreement. So the shard itself, it wasn't the vessel before it was broken, but the broken shard became a symbol for their agreement. So to keep with the Greeks, There's a great book by Peter Struck called The Birth of the Symbol, and to him it's all Greek. Our modern conception of a symbol comes through in this book. If this kind of thing is interesting, you have to read this book. Is that symbols were used by the allegorists to mark the limit of the text. So they would use words or images that would stick out to the readers or the listeners or the viewers into a realm of experience that couldn't be captured by ordinary thinking or simple prosaic description. The symbols were used as an allegory to kind of like spice things up or to bam, kick it up a notch kind of thing. They were a launch pad into meaning, and they have been effective, well, basically since the Greeks in this regard. As far as early symbolic thinking goes, it definitely predates the Greeks. We can say this with absolute certainty, and it's probably way older than we think. There was a shell from a mollusk found in Indonesia in 1890 that shows seemingly deliberate scratches on it. It doesn't look like it was made naturally. This was made most likely by Homo erectus due to the fact that this was found 500,000 years ago, 500,000 years ago in Indonesia. That to me is just absolutely mind-blowing. There are caves in Africa that seem to have been set up for ritual use, and there are etched rocks in Africa that look like snakes that are 180,000 years old. So we don't know exactly when we became conscious, but we could look as evidence for consciousness as to when these symbols started appearing, these physical symbols started appearing in the world. The best example of symbolic thinking, as far as early symbolic thinking, has to be cave paintings. Whether in France or in Spain, we have Lascaux and we have Chauvet, and they show the animals, and some of them are just absolutely beautiful. And to get back to magic, a lot of the paintings within these caves were, especially of animals that they would hunt, would be mixed with the blood of the animal itself that they killed. So there's no better example of magic than that. That's not magic, then I don't know what is. The symbols that have been with us a long, long period of time, they deal with fairly universal themes: birth, death, resurrection, fertility. These are the ones that seemingly never go away. Because of that, I have here's my hot take on symbols, because I have to have, for these broader subjects, I have to have my little idea. And this is not, it's not exclusively mine. I'm sure other people have come up with it before, but I think that symbols are an ecosystem. They seem to be a living ecosystem fed by the apprehension of them by us. They form, evolve, die off, and are breathed new life on a constant basis. Surrounding us at all times, old symbols eventually die out or reform in superior or ersatz forms. We should be well aware that while not all of them last, nothing about them is lost. Now this
reads very much like American Gods. The idea that old gods and new gods are constantly vying for power versus
right. People have not read American Gods. You absolutely have to read it.
Don't watch the show.
Don't watch the show? No. It's filmed here in Toronto.
It's awful.
I know somebody who was in it. A good example of how the life cycle of the symbol comes from old interpretations of symbols of the past. If I was to say vulture, what would you think about now as a symbol?
Like the proof of something has died.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But for a long period of time, several centuries, the vulture would signify the Virgin Mary. The vulture, people did not ever see vultures raising their young or eggs, and they thought that vultures just appeared. They morphed. It was their babies were immaculate conceptions. So that's why they equated it to the Virgin Mary for hundreds and hundreds of years.
I really like the albatross.
The albatross.
As a symbol. It was once a very good luck symbol.
Yeah.
Until one day it was shot and killed for food by a merchant, and then it became a sign of bad tidings.
Correct. One of the best examples, if you want to see how symbols change or morph, is to look at the Garden of Earthly Delights by Hieronymus Bosch. And looking at it now, we could it's crazy. It's all over the place. One pane is the Garden of Eden. The middle pane, which is the large one, is about where we're living now. And the last pane, or earthly pleasure. And then the last is of hell itself. When you look at it and you just be like, well, this is just kind of pre-surrealist. This guy might have just been crazy. Most cultural historians think that the symbols here, most of them are absolutely intentional. And they've been able to hone in on works written at the time, I believe it was 15th century, of things that we would now equate with wisdom. The symbol of the owl, apparently when the painting was done, meant alarm or caution. A lot of paintings, they don't hold a lot of value to us now as far as what their symbols mean, but at the time they were usually very, very pertinent. The
owl is still a fairly large symbol as far as it goes with the occult.
Yeah.
I think we were talking about the Bohemian Grove and how the owl is such an important symbol in that.
I'll talk a little bit about owls in a little bit, but again, the owl, because it's such an interesting figure in the way that it's seemingly silent, and it's living, it's constantly evolving, it's constantly growing. The one thing that people nowadays can kind of point to as far as the regard of symbols and magic itself are sigils and the use of sigils. And what is a sigil? A sigil is a pictographic representation of an outcome. The reigning king of sigils right now is a guy by the name of Gordon White. I've talked about him in previous episodes. Sigils will be their own episode somewhere further on down the line. Just everybody be patient. I've got a lot to say about them, but they can kind of be described as wish-granting squiggles. You have an outcome that you want to have happen, and you create a symbol for that outcome itself. You do a ritual, and then your doing of the ritual itself will somehow allow this pictographic representation to allow the thing to occur within reality. And they are extremely, extremely effective for the most part.
A symbolic spell.
Yeah, exactly. A symbol that is a spell to cause something to happen. A wish-granting squiggle. They kind of come from Austin Osman Spare, who was a late 19th century, early 20th century artist out of London. Eventually, his idea of sigils came out of very early forms of psychology and what the mind focuses on, what his idea of what the conscious or the unconscious was, and how symbols affect them. And later on in the 70s, the chaos magicians leapt on this, and they kind of made him the patron saint of chaos magic, in the sense that they took his ideas, and that became almost the basis of chaos magic itself. And sigils are pretty much synonymous with chaos magic. If you say chaos magic, people will say either Pete Carroll or sigil. And they are an unbelievable tool to observe just how alive symbols can be. They're remarkably fast sometimes. It's quite frightening. And they were used beforehand. Sigils, the word goes back a little further, but sigils were used for time-saving purposes for alchemists or occultists in earlier centuries, just as a time-saving measure. When they would be writing the things down, they would just draw a glyph, or what they considered was almost like a code. I think I'm not going to blow any minds here, but advertising, especially corporate-based advertising, has definitely got this idea. Whether it certainly wasn't a to B correlation that's we're going to use this, but the way that corporations and advertisers use symbols to an effect to get people to buy their things is definitely something that people should pay a little bit more attention to. If I was, to bring up the idea of an apple with a bite taken out of it, or even the letter G, or a red square with a white triangle in the center with rounded sides on the squares, that immediately conjures up of images that go straight to the brand itself. We can't be dismayed about these kind of things, though. It's just we have to recognize the power of the symbol itself and reclaim this somehow with our use of symbols and within magic itself. And I'm not talking about graffiti. Don't spray paint on somebody's property, what you think a magical glyph is. Like that's not, you're not doing anything. You're basically trying to seek attention. So
except the anarchy symbol.
That one's still fair game. Thank you. Yes, right. No, very good. For magicians themselves, how can symbols help them? How can they use symbols to make their lives more effective, or their magic more effective? I would say this is one of the most powerful tools that a magician has, and it's one that I will probably rag on constantly through the series of podcasts episodes that I do in the future. But it's not about what something can do for you, it's how something can do for you. There's a slight diversion or a little detour. Most magicians will say that the most powerful thing that they've read is usually not a book about magic. It's usually something on another line, whether an anthropological book or a science book. For me, maybe one of the most important books that I've ever read is a book called The Master and His Emissary by Dr. Ian McGilchrist. It's, in short, it's a book about brain hemispherics and how it has fallen out of favor. Left brain, right brain kind of thing. People think the left side of the brain is all about details and focus, whereas the right side of the brain is about broad, open, accepting forms. And McGilchrist basically says that we can't think of the brain doing this. The brain is split, but you need both parts of the brain to do things, and both parts of the brain do the things. But it's not what they do, it is how that hemisphere of the brain does it. This is just one of those things where in any kind of magic that I'm attempting, I'm constantly asking, instead of what I'm doing, but how I'm doing it and how to utilize this technique or how to utilize this idea. A good example that I would try to give people trying to understand this would be tarot cards. And when you buy a new deck of tarot cards, yeah, they're cool. They've got their symbols on them. You open it up, and also included in the little tarot pack is a little book, LWD, a little white book. And it will say what each card represents. You know, the three of pentacles or coins will be about work or this kind of thing. And immediately like, oh, I get it. So it's a list of correspondences. Or you might even go and buy a book about that specific tarot deck, and they have all of their the meanings of the cards listed right there. It's black and white. It's plain and simple. And this is wrong. Magic is not about symbol correspondence of A to B. This is what this card means. Take the cards, put the cards down, and see how they tell a story. It's how the cards interact with the other cards that you have with them. You're looking at the symbols and creating the story. It is about how, not what. And this is extremely, extremely important. Now, the tarot may seem impenetrable, but the symbols will speak to you. They have to, especially something like the Marseille tarot. They're great in this respect because they have sight lines, or they're looking at certain things, and how they do that. That's very important. And this works in helping out what is especially if you're beginning in magic, your magical intuition. Another example was the gentleman I mentioned earlier, Gordon White, with his sigils and what he does with sigils. He kind of asked the question, well, what happens after I've launched the sigil and I've got a piece of paper with a cool little symbol on it? Before him, people would just either burn them or they'd put them away in like a locked chest or whatnot. He came from a background that was involved in marketing, and he saw the piece of paper and he basically said, how can I use this object that has been launched or activated? How can I use this physical, tangible symbol in a better way? And he went back to what his job was, which was advertising. And he brought up the idea of low attention processing, which is used in ad agencies. It's basically symbols or ads are put in places where it's not subliminal advertising. It's outright advertising, but it's advertising almost at a distance. So you see the things that are trying to advertise to you, and you don't think they have a function, but they work. They really do work, and ad agencies have known this for more than 50 years. So Gordon White just basically said, oh, this is how to utilize this. He took the how, and he says, you know what, once you launched a sigil or activated a sigil, put them in places that you don't constantly find yourself, but you'll see them out of the corner of your eye. Keep them around for a little bit. And this, I think, when he put out this, he did a whole bunch of other things involving sigils, but this is, I think, the real breakthrough, and his way of seeing how to use something better goes to the core of magical efficacy, which is absolutely great. Another thing for people to do when dealing with symbols within a magical context is just go and walk and see them and start to pay a little bit more attention. We are just awash in symbols. Again, to go back to the Baudelaire poem, that it's a forest. We are literally, well, not literally, we are figuratively walking in a forest of these things, and they're all around, and just maybe try to start to notice them. On any kind of day, you'll see things like owls, specifically with security companies. And I'm not trying to talk about, the obvious ones like, oh, there's crosses everywhere for Jesus crosses, or like the Om symbol because there's an Indian restaurant there. You'll find that there are tons of symbols in places that you did not expect them. And a general knowledge of symbols is good, or at least being able to recognize them. And also a small knowledge of what the symbol stands for initially is helpful. But again, look at how that symbol is used. Again, it's how, it's not one. We have to go back a little bit to Carl Jung and his idea of archetype and archetypal images, as well as the interaction that they have with the collective unconscious. I think he's on the right track, but he doesn't go far enough. He was a very cautious man in this regard. I think that these symbols themselves are evidence or pointing towards something bigger, and this might be where I might lose some people. They seem to be primary evidence for spirits in some strange way. And hear me out for a little bit. The symbols, they didn't just appear. I don't know if we just created them or if they magically appeared. It's somewhat bigger than the collective unconscious. And again, with the one-size-fits-all archetype thing that Jung did, he just kind of stopped there. There's got to be something more. What came first, the demon or his seal? And I would think that the spirit has been here spirits have been here for a long time. And we're just beginning to understand that it's their world, not ours. And we're here kind of as visitors. For magicians and occultists of the past and contemporary magicians have all kind of stated in different terms how if there is one myth that or story that is somewhat universal, and it's tough, you really can't find a universal symbol, but the closest we can get to one that is universal is something of a entity giving man something to aid its progress in this world. And whether they be demons, spirits, angels, or what we have now is the belief that aliens. Mircea Eliade said that all creation stories are how human beings gained full consciousness. And this is kind of pointing us in the right direction. So as far as symbols, we need to realize that they are one of the keys to maybe figuring out this unknown aspect of reality, and to figure that the symbols that are alive and the signs, they have an interaction, and it's very much like ours. The story of the symbol, of its creation, its eventual destruction, and its resurrection, that's our story as well. To get even broader, something like the Big Bang, which is itself a very potent symbol, but it's also a symbol of our materialist world right now, in the one miracle that is allowed in a paradigm that doesn't allow for miracles. And I'm not trying to get all Carl Sagan, we are star stuff, we are the universe comprehending itself, we were created for the universe to comprehend itself. This is much more profound. It is the realization that there are non-physical entities that have strange ways of interacting with us and have through our development on a near constant basis, and symbols is one of the ways that they work.
Would you suggest you could call that spooky action at a
distance? At a distance? Yeah, in a way it could be, yeah. We don't know how these work. I could not, if you were to sit me down and put a gun to my head and say, what the fuck are spirits? I can't even hazard to guess. Life is the primary symbol, and this strange interaction that we have through living things and non-living things It is the magic. You are the magic. With that, that's the symbols episode.
Thank you, Doug.
No problem. Where to go from here? I'll have some really interesting show notes for this one. I could suggest some books of symbols. The Element Encyclopedia of Secret Signs and Symbols is a pretty good place to start if you just want to see some really cool pictures of symbols, and especially ones that speak to you. But get out there. It's not what they say or when they were created or why they were created or that it's always got to be of the 6 questions, go with the one that doesn't start with the W. It's about the how.
If I'm out in the world, Doug, and I see 2 symbols, what is a symbol I want to avoid the most, and what is a symbol I want to go towards the most?
What is this?
Based on your knowledge of me.
A symbol that I would suggest that you go towards? Oh, man.
18 plus, triple X.
Yeah. No, nothing like that. This is going to sound like a complete cop-out. You seem to know. I think, strangely enough, and if everybody, I mean, I would never say that everybody's got their guardian angel. That's kind of like a really old 19th century, to me, somewhat silly idea. But there is something strangely guiding you with some kind of agency. And for me, especially with my magical predilection so far, I surround myself with these spirits, so I'm somewhat familiar with them, or demons, or angels, or whatever you want to call them, or aliens. They could be aliens. Who knows? That's the podcast, everybody. And you can head to whatmagicisthis.com. There you'll find links to iTunes, to Stitcher, to Google Play. I'm on Radio Public, iHeartRadio. I just got that. I'm no longer on SoundCloud. Those dickheads wanted money, so Yahoo sucks to them. Also on my webpage, you'll find links to my Twitter account, my Facebook account, my Instagram account. If you like the podcast, please leave a little, a rating on iTunes wouldn't be bad. But if you don't feel like doing it, then I'm not going to force you to do it. My show notes, again, for this episode will be pretty cool. Check them out. And now we got to end the show with the post-show quid pro quo. Alex, TED Talks Toronto 2020. They've been looking at your Twitter account, and they say, Alex, we like the cut of this guy's jib. You've got 14 minutes to give a speech to a room of people at the Sony Center. What are you going to talk about?
Well, the thing I know about TED Talks is that they often don't pay their people. So I would probably initially tell them to kick rocks. But in the interest of being faithful to the deal we made about asking questions and answering them honestly, topics, I would love to talk to them. Oh man,
what's your big idea? What's there's got to be your big idea, and it just belongs to you. Everybody's got their big idea.
I do not believe, and maybe it's my own brand of narcissism showing, but thinking that I would have an idea outside of someone else's, or one that hadn't been done before, or it's Twitter sucks and you can't say an original thought because you just search it and someone else has said it 5 years ago, and that's what's fun about it. You can you just riff off something else. I do not think I could fill 15 minutes about any ideas that I have with a room full of people for any reason.
There's a sniper up in the balcony pointing a gun.
I would eat the bullet, man. I would say, do it. Let me go out with the strengths of my convictions, and my convictions tell me that I am just, as you said before, a creature in a multitude of creatures.
Oh, there you go. Wonderful.
If someone wants to spend a depleted uranium round on my forehead, they can.
Perfect. Alex, thank you for joining me.
Thank you, Doug.
We'll have you back on again, I'm sure. All right, everybody, that's the episode of What Magic Is This? Tune in next time, and we'll talk at you soon. Bye-bye.